Can you even hold a pen, Ms. Carter? The voice came from the back row of Roosevelt Elementary, dripping with adolescent cruelty. Sarah Carter's hands trembled as she tried to write on the whiteboard, the marker shaking so badly that her letters looked like a seismograph reading. The fifth graders snickered, phones already out to capture their shaky teacher for TikTok. But what none of those kids knew, what nobody in that building knew, was that those trembling hands had pulled 12 children from a submerged school bus 3 years ago. And by the end of this day, when the truth came out, not a single person in that classroom would be laughing. If watching Sarah endure public humiliation hits you as hard as it hits me, take a moment to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps more people discover these stories of hidden strength. Now, back to Sarah, who's about to face an escalating nightmare at Roosevelt Elementary. The morning had started like any other Monday at Roosevelt Elementary in Riverside, Michigan. Sarah Carter, 31 years old with long brown hair pulled into a simple ponytail, arrived at 7:15 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for the assistant principal's Tesla and janitor Mr. Johnson's old Chevy. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of the coming winter. In 2 weeks, it would be December 15th, the anniversary. Sarah tried not to think about it, but the date haunted her calendar like an accusation. Sarah grabbed her lesson plan folder from the back seat of her Honda Civic. Her hands trembled as she held it. They always trembled, even in sleep. Essential tremor, the doctors called it. A congenital neurological condition, worsened by stress, but incurable. It had started when she was 7, affecting every moment of her life since. Learning to write had been torture. Learning to eat without spilling had taken years. Dating had been a minefield of embarrassment and explanation. But what nobody knew was that 3 years ago, that tremor had gotten catastrophically worse. Nerve damage from prolonged cold water exposure. Severe hypothermia, post-traumatic stress. The doctors had told her it was permanent. The shaking that had once been manageable was now constant, visible, debilitating. She couldn't hold a coffee cup without a lid, couldn't button her own shirts. She'd switched entirely to pullovers. Couldn't sign her name legibly anymore. She entered through the side entrance, swiped her ID card, and walked down the corridor hearing her footsteps echo against the linoleum floors. The walls were covered with student artwork, bright-colored drawings of turkeys and autumn leaves in preparation for Thanksgiving. Roosevelt Elementary was Riverside's oldest school, built in 1952, a 3-story brick building that had educated generations of Riverside children. The heating system clanked and groaned, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and everything smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and children. Her classroom was number 203 at the end of the second-floor hallway, next to the girls' bathroom and across from the art room. When Sarah opened the door, the familiar smell greeted her. Fresh paper, pencil shavings, dry erase markers, and that faint plastic smell every classroom had. 24 student desks arranged in neat rows, a reading corner with beanbags and worn paperbacks, a smartboard that worked maybe 60% of the time. Posters about growth mindset and kindness covered the walls. Ironic given what happened here daily. She began preparing for first period, distributing math worksheets on equivalent fractions, carefully placing each one with her trembling hands. Every time she dropped one, which was often, she counted internally. 1, 2, 3. By the time she finished, she'd dropped 11. She picked them up, smoothed them out, tried again. This was her life now. Everything took twice as long. Everything required twice the effort. She'd been doing this for 5 years. 5 years of learning the 1,000 small adaptations of teaching with trembling hands. 5 years of developing techniques and workarounds. She used binder clips instead of staples. She typed instead of writing whenever possible. She had students help distribute materials. She'd become an expert at disguising her disability, at working around it, at pretending it wasn't slowly destroying her career. The coffee maker in the teacher's lounge had been her enemy this morning. She'd spilled twice before successfully filling her travel mug with lid. Jessica Torres, the third-grade teacher, had offered to help. Sarah had declined. She always declined. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. The first students started arriving around 7:50. Most were 10 years old, energetic and curious, full of that special childlike energy that made teaching both exhausting and rewarding. Sarah recognized the dynamics immediately. She'd been teaching long enough to read a classroom within the first week of school. Brandon Mitchell, the unofficial leader, always having the latest iPhone, always wearing designer sneakers, always needing to be the center of attention. His parents were both lawyers, worked 80-hour weeks, bought him things instead of giving him time. He had that particular brand of cruelty that came from feeling neglected despite material wealth. Chloe Anderson, blonde, pretty, desperate for Brandon's attention. She'd developed mean girl tendencies early, understanding instinctively that cruelty could be social currency. Her mother was on the PTA board, very concerned about standards and appropriate role models. David Chen, quiet, observant, sitting in the corner with a book. His parents ran the Chinese restaurant downtown, worked every evening, and David spent most afternoons reading in the back booth. He was kind, but too afraid of social isolation to stand up to Brandon. And Emma Rodriguez. Emma was different. There was something in her eyes, a depth of understanding unusual for a 10-year-old. She watched Sarah with curiosity rather than mockery, asked genuine questions instead of making jokes. Sarah didn't know why. Not yet. "Good morning, class," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk, attempting to hide the tremor. It never worked. They always noticed. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," came the chorus back, some perfunctory, some sincere. As she started toward the whiteboard, Brandon whispered, loud enough for Sarah to hear, "Bet we can't read anything again today." Giggles rippled through the class like a wave. Sarah felt her face flush but didn't stop. She picked up the blue dry erase marker and began writing the day's objective. Math, equivalent fractions. But her hands shook so badly that math looked like it had been written during an earthquake. Equivalent was barely legible. Fractions trailed off into an incomprehensible squiggle. "Ms. Carter," Chloe raised her hand, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I can't read your writing. Maybe you could use the projector. Or maybe someone else could write for you." The suggestion hung in the air like poison. Several students laughed. Sarah heard someone whisper, "Earthquake teacher," the nickname that had been following her for months, spreading through the school like a virus, jumping to social media, where it had become a hashtag. "Of course," Sarah said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Good idea, Chloe." She walked to her desk. Even that felt like a performance, aware of 24 pairs of eyes tracking her movements, and pulled out the projector remote. Her hand shook as she pressed the power button. It took 3 tries. More giggles. The projector slowly hummed to life, displaying her carefully typed lesson plan on the smart board. At least typing didn't shake as much. The tremor affected fine motor control more than gross motor skills. She could type, could walk, could even run. But writing, holding small objects, anything requiring precision, impossible. "Today we're learning about equivalent fractions," she said, forcing her voice to sound enthusiastic. "Can anyone tell me what equivalent means?" David's hand shot up. "It means equal to." "Exactly. So equivalent fractions are fractions that look different but have the same value. Like 1/2 and 2/4. She pulled up the first slide of her presentation. At least technology was on her side today. When it worked, Brandon raised his hand. "Miss Carter, how do you grade our papers if you can't hold a pen?" The question seemed innocent enough, but the smirk on his face revealed the intent. Several students leaned forward, curious. This was entertainment for them. "I use a computer, Brandon. I can type just fine." But what about in class? What if we need help and you have to write something? I manage. But how? Brandon, that's enough. Let's focus on fractions. But the damage was done. The students had been reminded that their teacher was different, defective. The whispers started, phones subtly emerged, despite the no-phone policy, and Sarah knew she'd be featured in more videos tonight. The math lesson proceeded with painful awkwardness. Every time Sarah tried to demonstrate something, her tremor became the focus. When she attempted to draw a diagram on the whiteboard, a simple rectangle divided into fourths, her shaking hand made it look like abstract art. The class erupted in barely suppressed laughter. Maybe you should just use the computer for everything, Madison Harper suggested, her tone somehow both helpful and condescending. Thank you for the suggestion, Madison, Sarah said tightly. By the time the bell rang for first recess, Sarah felt exhausted. It was only 9:30 a.m. She had 6 more hours of this. 6 more hours of being a spectacle, a joke, a walking example of what happened when you couldn't do your job properly. During the 15-minute recess, Sarah stood in the hallway monitoring students as they ran to the playground. Most teachers use this time to chat with colleagues, grab more coffee, take a bathroom break. Sarah just watched, making sure nobody got hurt, trying to be invisible. Ms. Carter? A small voice beside her. Emma Rodriguez stood there, holding a worksheet. Yes, Emma? I didn't understand problem 7. Can you explain it? Sarah looked at the worksheet. Problem 7 required finding equivalent fractions. She could explain verbally or, come inside for a minute, she said. They went back into the empty classroom. Sarah pulled up a visual on the computer showing fraction bars. See? When you divide a half into smaller pieces, you get fourths. Same amount, different pieces, Emma nodded slowly. Oh, that makes sense, she paused. Ms. Carter, do your hands hurt? The question was so direct, so innocently curious, that Sarah didn't know how to respond. Most people either ignored her tremor entirely or made jokes. Nobody asked if it hurt. Sometimes, Sarah admitted. Not pain exactly, but they get tired. It's like they're working all the time, even when I want them to rest. My abuela has shaky hands too. From Parkinson's, she used to be a seamstress but had to stop. I'm sorry to hear that. She says her hands remember sewing even though they can't do it anymore. Do your hands remember things? Sarah looked down at her trembling fingers. Did they remember? God, yes. They remembered cold water, small hands gripping hers, the desperate pull of drowning children, the moment when she couldn't hold on anymore, when hypothermia made her fingers cramp and… Yes, Sarah said quietly. They remember. Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense, then returned to the playground. Sarah stood alone in her classroom, staring at her hands, wondering what this child could possibly understand about memory and trauma. The rest of the morning was more of the same. Language arts involved reading aloud. Sarah could do that without her hands, at least. But when students had questions requiring whiteboard explanations, the mockery resumed. Social studies was a video, blessedly free of tremor-related humiliation. But then came lunch duty. Lunch period at Roosevelt Elementary cafeteria was controlled chaos. 450 kids, 3 lunch periods, 45 minutes each. The noise was deafening, children shouting, trays clattering, the industrial dishwasher rumbling in the background. Teachers rotated lunch duty weekly, and this was Sarah's week to monitor the 5th grade section. She stood by the milk cartons, hands in her coat pockets despite the cafeteria's warmth. Hiding them had become instinct, but pockets couldn't hide everything. Yo, earthquake teacher's here, the voice carried across the cafeteria. Brandon, of course. Several tables of 5th graders laughed. The nickname echoed. Earthquake teacher, earthquake teacher, becoming a chant. Sarah's face burned, but she kept her expression neutral. Showing emotion would only make it worse. She'd learned that the hard way. A lunch tray crashed to the floor nearby. A 1st grader, crying, Spaghetti and milk splattered everywhere. Sarah moved to help, but another teacher, Marcus Webb from 6th grade, got there first. "I got it, Sarah," he said, not looking at her. "Why don't you handle the milk line?" The implication was clear. Let someone with steady hands deal with actual problems. Sarah retreated to her post, feeling useless. Emma Rodriguez appeared again, this time with 2 friends. "Miss Carter, these are my friends Sophia and Michael. They want to meet you." "Hi," Sophia said shyly. She was small, with dark, curly hair. "Hey," Michael added. He was tall for 10, lanky. "It's nice to meet you," Sarah said, confused about why these children wanted to approach her. "Emma says you're really good at explaining things," Sophia said. "Better than our math teacher last year. Even though you have shaky hands, you don't get mad when we don't understand," Michael added. "Not like some teachers." Sarah felt an unexpected lump in her throat. "Thank you. That means a lot." They lingered for a moment, then Emma said something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "My mom says you used to be a firefighter. Is that true?" Sarah's hands began shaking worse. "Where did your mom hear that?" "She recognized you from the news." From the accident, the world seemed to tilt. Someone knew. After 3 years of successfully hiding, someone in this building knew who she really was. What she'd done. What she'd failed to do. "Emma, I can't talk about that." "Why not?" "My mom says you're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Emma. I'm just a teacher." But Emma was looking at her with those 2 knowing eyes. "She says you saved kids. Kids like us." Before Sarah could respond, a fight broke out across the cafeteria. 2 boys arguing over a basketball, shoving quickly, escalating. Sarah moved toward it, but Marcus was already there, separating them, taking charge. Sarah retreated again. Her phone vibrated. A text from Principal Davis. "Please see me after school today. We need to discuss some parent concerns." Parent concerns. Sarah knew what that meant. Chloe's mother had probably called again. Or Brandon's parents. Or any of the dozen families who'd made it clear they didn't think a disabled teacher was appropriate for their children. The afternoon dragged on with painful slowness. Science class involved a worksheet. Thank God, something she could do sitting down. But during quiet work time, she heard the whispers. How did she even become a teacher? "My mom says she's going to get fired." "I heard she dropped a kid's project, and it broke." The last one wasn't even true, but truth didn't matter. The narrative was set. Sarah Carter was incompetent, incapable, an embarrassment to Roosevelt Elementary. At 3:15, the final bell rang. Students flooded out like water from a burst dam, and Sarah sat at her desk, dreading her meeting with Principal Davis. She organized her papers, a task that took far longer than it should, and finally walked to the administrative office. Principal Charles Davis was in his late 50s, bald, with kind eyes that had seen too much bureaucracy. His office was cluttered with awards, photos of former students, and stacks of paperwork that seemed to reproduce overnight. "Sarah, come in. Close the door." She sat in the chair across from his desk, hands gripping her knees to stop the shaking. "It didn't work. I'll be direct," Davis said. "I received 3 parent calls today. They're concerned about your ability to effectively teach given your condition. My tremor doesn't affect my teaching ability." They disagree. They say their children can't read what you write, that you drop materials, that you can't adequately demonstrate certain concepts. "I adapt. I use technology." "Sarah." Davis's tone was gentle but firm. "I'm not questioning your dedication. But parents are threatening to transfer their children to other classes. The district is asking questions. There's concern about liability. What if you drop something that hurts a child? That's never happened. But it could." The words hung between them. Sarah felt her chest tightening, familiar panic creeping in. This was it. 5 years of struggling, adapting, surviving, and it was ending anyway. "What are you saying?" Davis sighed. I'm saying the school board is meeting Friday. They're going to discuss your continued employment. I wanted you to know beforehand, to prepare. Prepare for what? To be fired for having a disability? That's illegal. They're not firing you for having a disability. They're questioning whether you can perform essential job functions. It's different legally. But functionally, it's the same thing. Davis didn't argue. They both knew the truth. There's one more thing, he said quietly. Tomorrow we have a special assembly. It's the 3rd anniversary of the Riverside school bus accident. Mayor Reynolds is speaking, and survivors will be there. Given your history, I wanted to give you advance notice. You can take a sick day if you need. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to sit on them. How do you know about that? Your employment file, your previous position with the fire department, it's all there, Sarah. I've known since you were hired. Then why are you letting them question my competence? You know what those hands did. You know why they shake. I know, but the parents don't. And unless you're willing to tell them, I'm not. Then there's nothing I can do. Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. Is that all? Sarah, for what it's worth, I think you're an excellent teacher. And I think those kids have no idea how lucky they are. But luck didn't pay the bills. Luck didn't save her job. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, a small one-bedroom in a converted house, cheap rent for a teacher's salary, and stared at the wall. The November darkness came early this far north, and by 5:30 p.m. it felt like midnight. Her phone buzzed. A notification. Another TikTok video. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The video showed her trying to write on the whiteboard, her tremor exaggerated by slow motion. The caption, when your school hires someone from an earthquake zone to teach. Earthquake teacher. Chan Chu can't even write. John Roosevelt Elementary. 50 views. 127 likes. 43 comments. How is this legal? My tax dollars. Poor kids having to deal with this. This is what happens with diversity hires. But then, buried in the comments, that's Ms. Carter. She saved my life. Show some respect. Emma Rodriguez Sarah stared at the comment. Emma had defended her. This 10-year-old child had more courage than most adults. She closed the app and opened her photo album instead. Scrolled back 3 years. Found the photo she both treasured and hated. 12 children, wrapped in emergency blankets. Alive. Their families surrounding them, crying, hugging, thanking God and firefighters and anyone who'd listen. Sarah was in the background of the photo, barely visible, being loaded into an ambulance. Her hands were already shaking uncontrollably from hypothermia, her face pale, her body shutting down. The photo had been taken by a local news station. It had run for 1 day, then disappeared as the story shifted to the tragedy of the 7 who didn't make it. 7 children whose names Sarah knew by heart. Tyler Johnson, age 7. Maya Patel, age 8. Connor O'Brien, age 6. Isabella Martinez, age 9. Aiden Foster, age 7. Lily Chen, age 8. Noah Williams, age 6. She saw their faces every night before sleep. Wondered if she'd been faster, stronger, better. If she could have saved them too. The guilt was a living thing, coiled in her chest like a parasite. Therapy had helped, somewhat. Medication took the edge off. But nothing removed the fundamental truth. She'd failed. 7 families would never be whole again because she hadn't been good enough. That's why she taught. That's why she endured the mockery, the humiliation, the daily struggle of teaching with trembling hands. Because if she could help children, protect them, educate them, maybe she could balance the scales somehow. Maybe she could make up for her failure. But tomorrow, at the assembly, all of it would come out. The survivors would be there. Emma would be there. And everyone would know. Sarah opened her laptop and began typing her resignation letter. It seemed easier to leave on her own terms than wait to be fired. Dear Principal Davis, after careful consideration, I have decided to resign my position as fifth-grade teacher at Roosevelt Elementary, effective immediately. While I have valued my time here, recent challenges have made it clear that she stopped. Read it back. Deleted it. She couldn't quit. Not like this. Not without at least trying to make them understand. She closed the laptop and went to bed early, knowing sleep wouldn't come. Tuesday morning arrived with cold rain, the kind of November drizzle that made everything gray and miserable. Sarah drove to school in silence, her mind numb, hands gripping the steering wheel to stop their shaking. The parking lot was fuller than usual. The assembly was scheduled for 10 a.m., first thing after morning announcements. Parents were attending. Press was coming. It was a big deal, the 3-year anniversary of Riverside's worst tragedy. Sarah's classroom felt like a tomb. Students arrived subdued, aware that something significant was happening. Even Brandon was quiet, his usual performative cruelty muted. At 9:45, the announcement came, "All students and staff, please proceed to the gymnasium for our special assembly." The gymnasium at Roosevelt Elementary was a multi-purpose room that smelled like rubber and old socks. Bleachers pulled out, 450 students sitting in grade order sections, teachers standing along the walls, parents in folding chairs at the back. A small stage had been set up with a podium and microphone. Sarah positioned herself in the far corner, trying to disappear. But Emma spotted her, waved, smiled. Sarah managed a weak smile back. At precisely 10 a.m., Principal Davis took the podium. "Good morning, everyone. Today marks 3 years since the Riverside school bus accident, a tragedy that touched every family in our community. We're here to remember the 7 children we lost, and to honor the 12 who survived thanks to the brave actions of our first responders." He introduced Mayor Reynolds, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled hair and a politician's practiced empathy. She spoke about community resilience, about never forgetting, about how tragedy reveals character. Sarah barely listened. Her hands were shaking worse than ever, stress amplifying the tremor until her arms trembled too. She crossed them, tucked her hands into her armpits, tried to make herself small. "And now," Reynolds said, "I'd like to invite the survivors to stand. These 12 young people are here today because heroes jumped into freezing water 3 years ago." Around the gymnasium, 12 13-year-olds stood. Sarah saw Emma immediately. Of course, Emma was one of them. That explained the knowing looks, the questions, the defense in the TikTok comments. But Sarah also saw Michael Chen, Sophia Martinez, others whose faces she'd seen in newspapers, in nightmares, in the split-second moments before sleep. They were alive, growing, thriving. Because of her, but also because of Rodriguez and Kim. She reminded herself, it wasn't just her. These children are here because 3 first responders didn't hesitate, Reynolds continued. Diver Maria Rodriguez, who sadly passed away last year from cancer. A moment of silence. Diver James Kim, who now trains rescue divers in California. Applause. And diver Sarah Carter. Sarah's name echoed through the gymnasium like a gunshot. Every head turned, searching for her. She wanted to sink into the floor, to disappear, to be anywhere but here. Diver Carter sacrificed her health to save these children, Reynolds said, her voice taking on that rehearsed emotional quality politicians perfected. She pulled 12 kids from that submerged bus, working alone in freezing water while other teams were delayed. She suffered severe hypothermia and permanent nerve damage. Her career as a firefighter ended that day, but 12 families remained whole because of her sacrifice. The gymnasium was completely silent now. Even the youngest students understood they were witnessing something significant. "Ms. Carter is here today," Reynolds continued. "Not as Diver Carter anymore, but as a teacher. Right here at Roosevelt Elementary, teaching 5th grade. Heads turned faster now, students whispering, parents murmuring. Sarah's class looked shocked, confused, guilty. Sarah Carter taught herself to live with constant tremors, taught herself to adapt, to continue serving children in a new way. And she did it quietly, without asking for recognition or accommodations. She just showed up every day and did her job. Reynolds's eyes found Sarah in the corner. "Miss Carter, would you please come forward?" Sarah shook her head slightly. No, she couldn't, wouldn't. But then Emma stood, walked toward her, extended a hand. "Please," Emma whispered. "Please let us thank you." Sarah let herself be led to the front, Emma's small hand holding hers despite the tremor. As they walked, the other survivors stood and moved forward too, forming a line. 12 children, 12 lives. All because her hands, these shaking, unreliable hands, had refused to let go. When Sarah reached the stage, Reynolds stepped aside. The microphone was there, waiting. Sarah hadn't prepared anything, hadn't expected this. She looked out at the crowd, saw her 5th grade class in the 3rd row. Brandon's face was streaked with tears. Chloe was sobbing openly. David had his head in his hands. "I don't know what to say," Sarah began, her voice shaky. "I'm not good at speeches. My hands shake too much to read notes." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. 3 years ago, I was a different person. I was a firefighter, a rescue diver, someone who was good at my job. Then one day, that job asked everything from me, and I gave it. She held up her trembling hands. These hands pulled 12 children from freezing water. One by one, I pushed them through a narrow window, handed them to my partners, then went back for more. By the 12th child, she looked at Emma. By Emma, my body was shutting down. Hypothermia does that. Your brain stops working right. Your muscles seize up. Your hands start to cramp. The gym was deathly quiet. My partners pulled me out. They said other teams were coming for the remaining kids. They said I'd done enough. But 7 children were still in that bus when I left, and 7 children didn't make it out. Her voice broke. So yes, I saved 12. But I failed 7. And every night for 3 years, I see their faces. Tyler, Maya, Connor, Isabella, Aiden, Lily, Noah. I remember their names. I remember that I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, good enough to save them all. Tears were streaming down her face now, her trembling hands unable to wipe them away. I became a teacher because I thought maybe I could protect children in a different way. Maybe I could make up for my failure. But you know what's funny? She looked directly at her class. Some of you think I'm weak. You make videos mocking my hands. You call me earthquake teacher. You complain to your parents that I'm incompetent. Brandon made us sound like a wounded animal. And maybe you're right. Maybe I am weak. Maybe these hands are broken. But they're broken because they refuse to let go of children who needed saving. They shake because they stayed in freezing water past the point of survival. They're imperfect because they chose to be. She held out her hands to the auditorium, palms up, trembling for everyone to see. So, yes, I drop things sometimes. Yes, my handwriting is terrible. Yes, I have to adapt and work around my disability. But these hands saved 12 lives. These broken, shaking, imperfect hands are the reason 12 families are still whole. And if you think that makes me weak, if you think survival makes someone less than, then I don't know what to tell you. The gymnasium erupted. Not with applause, not yet, but with sound. Crying, gasping, the collective emotional release of 450 people confronting their own assumptions. Emma stepped forward to the microphone. I'm Emma Rodriguez. 3 years ago, I was the last child Ms. Carter pulled from the bus. I was panicking, couldn't breathe, thought I was going to die. And then I felt hands grab me. Shaky hands, but strong hands. Hands that wouldn't let go even though they were freezing. Other survivors came to the microphone one by one. Michael Chen. She pulled me through a window barely big enough for my body. I have scars on my shoulders from scraping through, but I'm alive. Sophia Martinez. I was unconscious when she found me. The doctor said another minute and I'd have been gone. Her hands brought me back. One by one, 12 children testified to Sarah's strength, her courage, her sacrifice. By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Brandon had left his seat, walked to the front, and stood there waiting. When the survivors finished, he approached the microphone, his voice breaking. Ms. Carter, I'm Brandon Mitchell. I'm the one who started calling you Earthquake Teacher. I made videos. I made fun of you every single day. And I didn't know. I should have asked, should have cared, should have seen that you were a person, not a joke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Chloe came next, barely able to speak through her tears. My mom complained about you. She said you weren't qualified. She said I should transfer to a different class. And I agreed with her because I thought disabilities made people less than. But you're not less than anything. You're more than all of us. One by one, Sarah's students came forward, apologizing, crying, trying to make amends for cruelty they couldn't take back. And finally, from the back of the gymnasium, a woman stood. Mid-40s, professional clothes, the kind of perfectly styled appearance that screamed PTA president. I'm Jennifer Anderson, Chloe's mother. Her voice was thick with emotion. I called Principal Davis 3 times last week, demanding my daughter be moved to a different class. I said Miss Carter was incompetent. I said she was a liability. I said... She broke off, crying. I said terrible things I can never take back. And I am so profoundly sorry. Other parents stood, adding their voices, apologizing for complaints, for assumptions, for prioritizing perfection over humanity. Principal Davis finally took the microphone back. The school board meets Friday to discuss Ms. Carter's continued employment. I think this assembly has given us our answer. He looked directly at Sarah. Ms. Carter, on behalf of Roosevelt Elementary, on behalf of this community, I want to say what should have been said 3 years ago. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for continuing to serve children, even when it became harder than anyone should have to endure. You are exactly the kind of teacher every child deserves. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Sarah stood on the stage, trembling hands held out to her sides, letting 450 people see exactly what sacrifice looked like. The next day, everything was different. When Sarah walked down the hallway, students stepped aside, not from avoidance, but from respect. Several stopped to say hello, to apologize again, to simply acknowledge her presence. In her classroom, Brandon had organized something. Every student had written a letter, 24 letters, expressing gratitude, apologizing for cruelty, promising to do better. We wanted you to have these, Brandon said quietly, so you know, that we'll never forget. Sarah read them during her lunch break, crying through every single one. That Friday, the school board met. It was a brief meeting. The motion to question Sarah's employment was withdrawn. Instead, they voted unanimously to commend her for exemplary service and to implement new anti-bullying and disability awareness training district-wide. But perhaps most importantly, the tremors started to feel different. It hadn't decreased. If anything, the stress of recent days had made it worse. But when Sarah looked at her hands now, she didn't just see failure and weakness. She saw strength, endurance, survival. 3 years ago, these hands had refused to let go of 12 drowning children. They'd held on past the point of reason, past the point of safety, past the point where most people would have given up, and they were still holding on. Every day, showing up, adapting, surviving, teaching children that disability wasn't weakness, that imperfection wasn't failure, that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who keep going despite everything. A week after the assembly, a package arrived at Sarah's classroom. Inside was a framed photograph. 12 children, now 13 years old, all holding hands. In the center of the circle, empty space where Sarah's hands would go. The inscription read, "To Ms. Carter, the hands that saved us, the hands that teach us, the hands that show us what real strength looks like. Thank you for never letting go. Love, the 12. Sarah hung it on her wall, next to her teaching certifications and her favorite student drawings. And every morning when she arrived at school, trembling hands gripping her lesson plans, she looked at that photo and remembered. These hands were broken. But broken things could still be beautiful, still be strong, still be exactly what someone needed. Sometimes the strongest hands are the ones that never stop shaking. Emma Rodriguez started a tradition. Every Monday morning, she'd bring Sarah her coffee, already in a lidded travel mug, already prepared exactly how Sarah liked it. Not out of pity, but out of respect. A quiet acknowledgement that everyone needs help sometimes. Other students followed. David Chen began volunteering to erase the whiteboard. Chloe organized supplies so Sarah could grab them easily. Brandon set up the projector every morning without being asked. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Anderson, Chloe's mother, the PTA president who'd led the complaint campaign, requested a private meeting with Sarah. They met after school on a gray December afternoon, in Sarah's classroom with its student drawings and the new photograph of the 12. "I owe you more than an apology," Jennifer began, her perfectly manicured hands twisting a tissue. "I owe you an explanation." "Not an excuse, an explanation." Sarah waited. "My sister has MS, multiple sclerosis. She started showing symptoms 15 years ago. Tremors, weakness, eventually had to use a wheelchair. And I watched my parents treat her differently, with pity, like she was broken. And I saw how much she hated it." Jennifer's voice cracked. "So when Chloe came home talking about her teacher with shaky hands, I panicked. I convinced myself, that having a disabled teacher would teach my daughter that disabilities make people less capable, that it would normalize struggle instead of excellence. I thought I was protecting her." "But you were teaching her something worse," Sarah said quietly. "You were teaching her that different means inferior. That accommodation means weakness. I know. God, I know that now." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "My sister called me after the assembly. She'd seen the news coverage. She told me I'd become exactly the kind of person who made her life harder. The kind who sees disability first and person second." Sarah's hands were shaking in her lap, but she didn't hide them anymore. "Jennifer, can I tell you something? Those first few weeks after the accident, when I realized my hands would never be steady again, I wanted to die. Not dramatically, not suicidally, but I genuinely didn't know how to live in a body that didn't work the way it used to." Jennifer nodded, tears flowing freely now. "But then I realized something. My hands shake because they did something extraordinary. They're imperfect because they chose to be. Every tremor is a reminder that 12 children are alive. And that's not a weakness. That's a fucking badge of honor." Sarah rarely swore, but the word landed with appropriate weight. "So, yes, I drop things. Yes, I need accommodations. Yes, I work twice as hard as other teachers to do the same job. But I'm teaching your daughter something more important than math or science. I'm teaching her that strength comes in unexpected packages, that heroes don't always look like superheroes, that sometimes the person struggling is the strongest person in the room." Jennifer was openly sobbing now. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I know. And I forgive you. But more importantly, you need to teach Chloe what you learned. Because she's going to encounter people with disabilities her entire life. And how she treats them will define who she becomes." They talked for another hour. About ableism, about assumptions, about how easy it is to be cruel when you've never experienced vulnerability. When Jennifer finally left, she hugged Sarah, carefully, respecting her space, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." As December progressed, the 3-year anniversary date approached. December 15th, the date that had haunted Sarah since it happened. The date when 7 children had died despite her best efforts. Principal Davis approached her on December 10th. The survivors want to do something for the 15th. A private memorial, just them and their families. They've asked if you'd attend. Sarah's immediate instinct was to refuse. She couldn't face those families. Not the families of the 12, but the families of the 7. The ones who'd lost everything. The families of the lost children will be there, Davis added gently. They specifically requested you. Sarah's stomach dropped. Why would they want to see me? I failed their children. Sarah, you need to hear what they have to say. Please, just come. The memorial was held at Riverside Community Church, a small interfaith space that had hosted countless grief counseling sessions over the past 3 years. 12 survivors sat in the front row with their families. Behind them, 7 empty chairs with photographs: Tyler, Maya, Connor, Isabella, Aiden, Lily, Noah. Sarah arrived late, slipping into the back row, hoping to be invisible. But Emma saw her and immediately came back. You need to sit with us, Emma insisted. I can't. I don't belong there. Yes, you do. Please. Sarah let herself be led to the front, past the 7 empty chairs, past the photographs of children she'd failed to save. She sat between Emma and Michael, feeling like an imposter. The service was beautiful and heartbreaking. Each survivor spoke about where they were now, what they were doing, how they were living. College plans, hobbies, dreams, all possible because Sarah's hands hadn't let go. Then something unexpected happened. Connor O'Brien's mother stood up. Patricia O'Brien was in her mid-40s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much grief. She walked to the microphone with slow, deliberate steps. My son Connor was 6 years old when he died. He loved dinosaurs, hated broccoli, and wanted to be a paleontologist. He was afraid of the dark, but brave about everything else. Her voice was steady, practiced from 3 years of grief counseling. For a long time I was angry. Angry at the bus driver, angry at the road conditions, angry at the school district, angry at God. But most of all, I was angry at the first responders. I thought if they'd been faster, better, more prepared, my Connor would still be here. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. Then I learned the details. I learned that one diver, Sarah Carter, pulled 12 children from freezing water. 12. Alone. Working past the point of hypothermia, past the point of safety, until her own body was shutting down. I learned that she was pulled from the water unconscious, that she nearly died saving those 12. Patricia looked directly at Sarah. And I realized Connor didn't die because Sarah Carter failed. Connor died because the accident was catastrophic, because the water was freezing, because the bus sank too fast, because sometimes, despite our best efforts, tragedy happens. She walked toward Sarah, who was crying now, trembling harder than ever. My son died, but 12 children lived. 12 families are whole. And you sacrificed your health, your career, your body, trying to save them all. You didn't fail my son, Ms. Carter. You're the reason 12 other mothers didn't lose their children. Patricia knelt in front of Sarah, took her shaking hands in both of hers. On behalf of the 7 families, I want to say thank you. Thank you for trying. Thank you for caring. Thank you for destroying yourself trying to save them all. We don't blame you. We never blamed you. We're grateful that someone fought so hard for our children, even if the fight was lost. One by one, the other 6 families approached. Maya's father, Isabella's grandmother, Aiden's parents, Lily's mother, Noah's stepfather, Tyler's aunt, each expressing gratitude, forgiveness, release. Sarah couldn't speak, could only sob as 3 years of guilt finally began to ease. The service ended with a candle lighting. 12 candles for the survivors, 7 for the lost, and 1 in the center for Sarah, whose hands had held them all. School resumed in January. Sarah returned to her classroom with something new. Peace. Not complete, not perfect, but real. The nightmares didn't stop entirely, but they became less frequent. The guilt remained, but it was manageable now. Her teaching improved too. Not because her hands shook less, they didn't, but because she stopped hiding. Started being honest with students about disability, adaptation, perseverance. "Ms. Carter," a new student asked in February, "why do your hands shake?" "Because I have a neurological condition called essential tremor. And 3 years ago, it got worse when I pulled 12 children from freezing water." "Want to hear the story?" She told it simply, honestly. The students listened with wide eyes, asked questions, understood. By March, Sarah had started speaking at other schools, disability awareness assemblies, anti-bullying campaigns, teacher training sessions, sharing her story, teaching others what Roosevelt Elementary had learned. The TikTok videos never fully disappeared. But now they were different. Students filming Sarah with respect, sharing her story, using hashtags like Real Hero and Sien's Strongest Hands. One video went particularly viral. Brandon Mitchell, now in 6th grade, giving a presentation about disability awareness. He showed the old mocking videos, then his face as he watched them now. "This is what shame looks like," he told the camera. "This is what happens when you realize you bullied a hero. Don't be me. Ask questions. Show respect. See people, not disabilities." 10 million views, 2 million likes, thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of being judged for disabilities, of learning to see past assumptions. Sarah's impact rippled outward in ways she'd never imagined. In May, the University of Michigan invited her to speak at their School of Education commencement. Standing before 300 graduating teachers, Sarah held up her trembling hands. "These hands will never be steady. They'll shake for the rest of my life. But they taught me the most important lesson I can pass on to you. Teaching isn't about perfection. It's about presence, showing up, trying, refusing to give up, even when everything is hard." Standing ovation. 20 minutes of applause. By June, when school let out for summer, Roosevelt Elementary had transformed. Disability accommodations weren't afterthoughts. They were integrated into every classroom. Students with ADHD, dyslexia, autism, physical disabilities, all supported, all valued, all taught that different didn't mean less. And it started because one teacher with shaking hands refused to hide. On the last day of school, Sarah's students presented her with a gift. A bracelet, handmade with 13 charms. 12 represented the survivors, each engraved with initials. The 13th, in the center, read, "The hands that hold us." "We wanted you to wear this," Emma explained, "so you remember that your hands don't just shake. They hold, they save, they teach, they love." Sarah wore that bracelet every day. Sometimes, in difficult moments, she'd touch the charms and remember. These hands had saved 12 children, had taught hundreds more, had shown thousands that strength comes in unexpected forms. These hands were broken, but broken things could still be strong, still be beautiful, still be exactly what someone needed. 3 years ago, Sarah Carter's hands had pulled 12 children from freezing water. Today, those same hands were still saving lives. One student at a time, one lesson at a time, one moment of understanding at a time. Sometimes heroes wear capes. Sometimes they wear rescue gear. And sometimes they wear trembling hands and keep showing up anyway, because that's what real strength looks like.